The pressure rose by 20.
Well, it's a cool late summer night over at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, where two NASA astronauts and a Russian cosmonaut are aboard a Soyuz spacecraft situated 160 feet atop a Soyuz booster and ready to launch a little less than an hour from now at 4:17 p.m. this afternoon Central Time, 3:17 a.m. local time over in Baikonur. We're getting a live view right now of that Soyuz rocket on the Site Number 1 launch pad in Baikonur, where a team of launch controllers are watching over all the systems aboard the rocket, which is now fully fueled and ready for launch. No issues have been tracked throughout the day, which began with the fuel and oxidizer loading at about 11:17 a.m. Central Time this morning, or 10:17 p.m. out at the launch site in Baikonur, and was completed about 2 hours later. And then at this point, the launch vehicle's control systems have been prepared. Pretty soon, the gyroscopes on board will be activated. Good afternoon to everybody tuning in from the International Space Station Flight Control Room. This is Mission Control Houston. Along with flight control teams around the world supporting the International Space Station program, here in Mission Control Houston, the team's watching over the Expedition 53 crew and all the station systems and preparing to support the increase from 3 to 6 crew members later today, with the addition of NASA astronauts Mark Vande and Joe Acaba, and Russian cosmonaut and Soyuz commander today, Alexander Misurkin, representing Roscosmos. These three are about to begin a planned single-day flight to the International Space Station, with docking scheduled approximately 6 hours after the launch at 9:57 p.m. Central Time tonight, 8:57 a.m. in the morning over in Baikonur the next day, where colleagues, friends, and family of the Soyuz crew are going to be watching all of these events unfold. And the Soyuz MS-06 spacecraft that they're riding up in is going to be docking with the Poisk module at a port over on the space-facing side, so the top of the space station on the Russian segment. And they are going to join the current station residents on board, NASA astronaut and Expedition 53 Commander Randy Bresnik, and flight engineers and Russian cosmonaut Sergei Ryazanskiy of Roscosmos, and Italian astronaut Paolo Nespoli representing ESA, the European Space Agency. Nespoli on the left there, Ryazanskiy in the middle, and Bresnik on the right. Those three arrived at the station aboard the Soyuz MS-05 spacecraft back on July 28th. Cosmonauts to perform on the Russian segment on the station. Meanwhile, here in Houston this afternoon, the team here in Mission Control are going to be monitoring today's launch and getting updates on the flight from their Russian counterparts. The Orbit 2 team just handed over, and in the middle of your screen there in the jacket, you see Flight Director Vincent Lacourt, who's going to be on console for both the launch and all of the docking and hatch opening activities today. And just above him in the blue shirt there is Andreas Mogensen, the Capcom for today, or the communication link between our team here in Houston and the crew in space, Mogensen from the European Space Agency. And during the Soyuz's climb to orbit, all the tracking and telemetry is downlinked to the ground stations along the flight path, and that then gets routed to the Russian Mission Control Center found just outside of Moscow. Right now, though, we are 57 minutes, 50 seconds and counting away from the targeted launch time of this Expedition 53 crew to the International Space Station. The mission itself is launching under the call sign Altair, chosen by the Soyuz MS-06 commander Alexander Misurkin. Altair is the brightest star in the constellation of Aquila, the Eagle, and the stylized representation of an eagle spreading its wings is in the Soyuz crew mission patch, just under a Soyuz vehicle, both flying high above the Earth. And then logos of the different space agencies, NASA and Roscosmos, are shown in the lower quadrant. And again, here in the patch, you can see an eagle spreading its wings across the center of the crew's mission patch and just under a Soyuz vehicle, both flying high above the Earth. The continents of the planet depicted below. The winning concept was actually developed by Alexei Terapata, and the final design was created by Dutch artist Luc Vande. Then the talisman that you'll see floating inside, the zero-G indicator that you may see hanging over the crew, is a miniature Sputnik. Just about 9 minutes after the launch, following the shutdown, the Sputnik model hanging above Acaba, Vande, and Misurkin should begin to float, and that'll be the signal that they've entered orbit. Usually small models or toys or dolls are used as these zero-G indicators, and those date all the way back to Gagarin's flight as a Russian cosmonaut tradition. And the small Sputnik was made for the crew by RSC Energia, the Russian aerospace contractor that provides the Soyuz for Roscosmos. And as Misurkin was quoted, it's very symbolic because it was developed by Energia and made from parts of the Buran, referencing Russia's former space shuttle. Two spaceflight veterans and one first-time flyer are going to be launching today aboard the Soyuz MS-06. NASA astronaut Mark Vande, who's going to be serving as the Soyuz flight engineer in the left seat, was born in Falls Church, Virginia, and holds a Bachelor of Science in Physics from St. John's University and a Master of Science in Applied Physics from Stanford University. Before he became an astronaut, Vande, who's a retired colonel in the U.S. Army, was commissioned in the Army through the ROTC program and served as a combat engineer. Back in 1999, he became an assistant professor of physics at the United States Military Academy in West Point, and then in 2003, he reported to the Army's 1st Space Battalion at Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado. Once there, he served as an Army Space Support Team leader, then as the battalion's operations officer. As an Army Space Support Team leader, he deployed to Iraq for 12 months in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Vande reported to the Johnson Space Center in Houston back in July of 2006 to serve as a capsule communicator at Capcom here in Mission Control. He was selected in 2009 as part of NASA's 20th astronaut class and completed his astronaut candidate training in June 2011. Vande is going to be venturing into space for the first time today. And then he'll be making that trip alongside veteran Russian cosmonaut Alexander Misurkin, who's making his second trip into space today. Born in Yershichi in the Smolensk region of Russia, Misurkin studied at the Kacha High Air Force Pilot School and the Amaver Military Aviation Institute, graduating in 1999 as a pilot engineer. Then from 1999 to 2006, he served as a pilot instructor and air flight commander at the Krasnodar Military Aviation Institute until he was selected to join the cosmonauts group in 2006. Then he became a test cosmonaut in June of 2009. Then his first flight started aboard Soyuz TMA-08M back in March of 2013, where he served as a flight engineer on the first manned Soyuz flight to use this new fast rendezvous approach to the station, reaching in just less than 6 hours. Misurkin served as a flight engineer for expeditions 35 and 36 from March until September of 2013, and during that time he completed 3 spacewalks with a total of over 20 hours spent outside the space station. For now, he has more than 166 days in space and is going to serve as the Soyuz commander for this mission and will transition from Expedition 53 flight engineer to Expedition 54 commander in December after current crew members Randy Bresnik, Sergei Rosansky, and Paolo Nespoli depart. And then the third crew member inside the Soyuz alongside them will be veteran NASA astronaut Joe Acaba, who's making his 3rd trip into space today. Acaba is the first astronaut of Puerto Rican heritage and was born in Inglewood, California, and then grew up in Anaheim. He served as a sergeant in the United States Marine Corps Reserves and has a bachelor's degree in geology from the University of California, Santa Barbara, and a master's degree in geology from the University of Arizona. Acaba worked as a hydrogeologist in Los Angeles, California, and then spent 2 years in the United States Peace Corps as an environmental education awareness promoter in the Dominican Republic, and was the manager of the Caribbean Marine Research Center in the Bahamas. And then just prior to arriving at NASA, he taught 1 year of high school science at Melbourne High School in Florida and 4 years of middle school math and science at the Dunellen Middle School in Florida. And then Acaba was selected as an astronaut candidate in May of 2004. Began training at NASA's Johnson Space Center as part of NASA's 19th astronaut class. His first trip into space was back in March of 2009 as a mission specialist educator with the STS-119 crew aboard Space Shuttle Discovery. That mission delivered the final pair of solar arrays to the International Space Station and saw Acaba accumulate almost 13 hours of spacewalking time over the course of 2 spacewalks. And then his second mission into space was aboard a Soyuz, so that was his first trip up in the Russian vehicle back in May of 2012, where he served as an Expedition 31 and 32 flight engineer until September of 2012. And everything's still on track for our liftoff today at 4:17 p.m. Central Time, 3:17 a.m. over there in Baikonur, just 50 minutes, 40 seconds away. You'll hear some intermittent music throughout as the teams down in Baikonur are pumping some music into the cabin for the crew members who are just a little over 50 minutes away from launch. During the climb to orbit, tracking and telemetry from the vehicles downlinked to the ground stations along the flight path and routed back to the Launch Control Blockhouse near the launch pad in Baikonur, and then up to the Russian Mission Control Center just outside of Moscow, where we're getting a view right here. The flight's controlled from Baikonur until the shutdown of the third stage engine, and then control over the vehicle is transitioned to the Russian Flight Control Center, again in Koryov, just outside of Moscow. Just seconds after the Soyuz reaches orbits, the vehicle's command and control system will be activated. A number of stored computer commands will deploy all of the navigation and communication antennas, and also the solar arrays, which will collect power for use by the onboard batteries, generating electricity for all of the Soyuz systems. The very first antennas out will be the core's rendezvous and docking antennas, which are used to provide all of the automatic range and rate of closure information on the final approach, basically that automated docking system for the Soyuz as it's homing in on that Poisk module. And then immediately after reaching orbit, the crew will oversee a variety of programmed activation sequences to get a number of systems on just before the spacecraft passes out of range of Russian ground stations. Some of those systems include the spacecraft's power supply system, the radio communication system, and that all critical motion control system. And then during the first orbit of today's flight, the Soyuz will automatically execute the first 2 of several orbital adjustment burns planned as the vehicle fine-tunes its path up towards the of vehicles. In the Soyuz craft for these crew members, just 48 minutes and counting away from their targeted launch on board the Soyuz MS-06 spacecraft inside of the Soyuz rocket at the very top. It is nighttime, as you can see, early morning there in Baikonur, so should get hopefully a pretty spectacular view as it rockets across the night sky over the Kazakh steppe during a roughly 9-minute climb to orbit for these 3 crew members. Again, the crew was awakened at about 7:17 a.m. Central Time this morning, 6:17 p.m. over in Baikonur, which is about 9 hours prior to the launch. And then they participated in all of the final pre-launch activities. Before departing for the launch pad, all three observed the very long-standing tradition of autographing the doors at the Cosmonaut Hotel in Baikonur, Kazakhstan. You can see each one taking the turn here. You can see a number of different international partner astronauts with signatures across the door. Again, they sign their names, write their flight, and sign the date as well. And they do this every single time before a flight. So Acaba will have 2 signatures now on these doors, as will Misurkin, and this the first time for Vande. And then before departing the Cosmonaut Hotel, they get a blessing from a Russian Orthodox priest who also the day before goes out and blesses the rocket on the pad.
Now the main folks will go. What about the backup crew?
And you can see the backup crew in the background there. 2 NASA astronauts, Scott Tinkle and Shannon Walker, and Russian cosmonaut Anton Shkaplerov. And at about 10:17 a.m. this morning here in Houston, or 9:17 at night over in Baikonur, they departed the Cosmonaut Hotel to board a bus to ride out to the Integration and Suit-Up Facility at Building 254 on the Baikonur Cosmodrome. You can see the crew walk out here, getting a chance to wave to all the folks gathered there to watch the day's launch, including members of the media, but also family members, friends, and program guests from both NASA and the Russian Space Agency, Roscosmos.
Thank you. Bye, Dad.
And again, the first step in their journey was to depart the Cosmonaut Hotel, and then they arrived at Building 254, the Integration and Suit-Up Facility, at about 10:02 p.m. at nighttime over in Baikonur. Once there, each of the crew member undergoes final medical exams and then gets suited up in their Sokol launch and entry suits. These are the white pressurized suits that you can see Misurkin getting into first, that they wear throughout all of the activities, the launch, the docking, all the dynamic aspects of the flight of this Soyuz vehicle. And again, each of these suits able to be pressurized throughout the flight, so just in the instance of a loss of cabin pressure, they have the suits as that backup capability to keep the astronauts safe. A team of specialists from Roscosmos and Energia responsible for suiting up each of the crew members. Again, this happening right after their final medical checkups. All the crew members kept in quarantine for about 2 weeks or so, just before the flight, just to help ensure that they're as healthy as possible before this flight into that very enclosed environment of the space station. But following this, they'll move into another room to get pressure checks on all of these suits. But the suit up definitely the first step once they're at this integration facility.
Okay, for photographers, 2 minutes together. And look here.
And again, now they come into this room where one by one they load into a mock-up of an actual seat inside the Soyuz vehicle, and their suits are pressurized up to their flight pressure. This just to ensure all the seals, everything good integrity on the suits themselves, and you can see the mock-up of the Soyuz seat there. The actual liner for each one of these seats is custom molded inside the actual spacecraft to the astronauts. This to ensure that they have as tight of a fit, primarily for the actual landing phase of the Soyuz, when it's a little bit more jarring. And that tightly molded seat for each of the crew members helps to keep them very much in place and help minimize any potential injury, anything like that. But again, you'll see the suits puff up a little bit as they get pressurized. One by one, Misurkin going first, Vande second, and Acaba third. And then we should see shortly, as this camera is looking through a pane of glass, on the other side of this glass, family, friends, and program officials from NASA and Roscosmos gathered, as you can see here, to watch them during these final suit-ups and get one final chance to speak to the crew members before they head over to the rocket.
That's a good picture. Very good picture. And now video. So this one is for Grandma. And as a producer, trust me, I know how to do this. Well, let Grandma sit. You can take pictures on the side. Let Grandma sit down.
No, it just closes up as soon as it's like it seals it shut and opens it. It determines the differential pressure between the suit and outside.
What's the first thing you're going to eat when you get there?
Good question. Whatever they give me. I think the crew that's up there is waiting for our arrival. It's kind of helped set up our living accommodations and our first meal and stuff like that. No. No, it's an indication that the training is really good because so far it feels like everything we've done in training.
Not for the minute. Not for the minute.
Hello.
How are you? Grandma wants to know why you have two lunches.
Pasta filled with meat, like a big dumpling. A big dumpling. No shots though, right? You're driving? And everybody in the world's listening. Teach me that one. I forgot to ask you, got any EVAs scheduled?
What is that?
EVAs.
Well,
we have 3 coming up in October-ish time frame, and so we're looking at the, who's who, but yeah, we have 3 coming up. Cool. Yeah. Nice. Tell them we got a rebuild. You got 6 months. Yeah. That would be awesome. Go back for spring break. Let's do it. Let's do it. I'm down with that. I'm working. We'll do it with the fishes. Oh, look at this.
You guys will leave, and I think we'll
I
talk to
can
the
either
manager
confirm
for a
or
bit.
deny the presence of any government.
back by 5.
You can be there by 4. Yeah. It's prime time. I think they were there.
And then after the families had a chance to speak, several program officials from both Roscosmos and NASA having the opportunity to speak to the crew members as well.
We're here. We got you. Call me, write me. Have a good time up there. And best of luck. Wish you good flight and successful return. And let everything go well with no issues.
space flight, human space flight's a team sport, and unfortunately there's not enough room in the Soyuz for your entire team, but no, the rest of your team is here on the planet, ready to support you and ready to take care of you. So you guys have a great time on orbit, and know we're here on the planet ready to work with you.
We'll be carrying the whole team in our hearts.
Thank you so much.
Have a great expedition. There's plenty of fun things for you on orbit. Enjoy your time on station and take good care of the station for us.
Звучат фанфары в исполнении Ланчакова. Поэтому
And I can't follow Lanchikov's speech. All I can say is, have a safe flight, good luck, do quality work, and of course, as always, we will be glad to see you, to greet you back here on Earth. All the best to you. Again, congratulate you. Congratulations for the work that you're about to do. You will work, you're going to work well, you're going to work hard, be safe in this flight. And the work on the station is in your hands, and we look forward to hearing you back on the Earth.
And after speaking to those officials, which the two NASA ones we heard from were Kirk Shireman first, who's the Space Station Program Manager, and William Gersemeyer, the Associate Administrator for Human Exploration and Operations, the crew members were ready to walk out. And getting a chance to wave one final time before boarding their bus, which they boarded at about 1:17 p.m. Central Time, midnight 17 over in Baikonur. Crew is ready to depart building 254 and ride over to launch pad number 1. The drive typically takes about 25 minutes, so they arrive at the pad at about 1:42 p.m. Central, 12:42 a.m. in Baikonur, and then getting ready to get down the bus again, assisted by various members of Roscosmos and NASA. The one just helping the astronauts off there is former Russian cosmonaut Yuri Malenchenko, who has accumulated more time in space than just about everybody else in the history of both space programs.
The crew of the manned transport vehicle Soyuz, we are reporting for today. The rocket is ready to welcome you.
Tradition, taking a moment to turn around and wave one last time before making their way to the elevator and on up into the Soyuz spacecraft. Just behind them, billowing oxygen was fueled just about 3 hours prior to the planned liftoff time. And these crew members, after they headed up the elevator into the spacecraft, were strapped in, and they've been on board now for almost 2 hours. We have Misurkin, Acaba, and Vande suited up inside the spacecraft and ready for launch. And And now we're back with a live view right here of the Soyuz on the launch pad. At this point, you can see much more of the rocket now as the service structure components have been lowered. The clamshell-like gantry service towers have been retracted in preparation for the liftoff, which as of right now is 31 minutes, 45 seconds away. At this point, the suit leak checks are underway, and then the emergency escape system should have been armed. This escape tower is that very top point, the small narrow point at the top that would fire in the event of a problem during launch. It's designed to pull the spacecraft and the crew clear of the booster, enabling the capsule to then parachute to a safe landing in the event of any emergencies during the launch or the early stages of the climb to orbit. And emblazoned upon this Soyuz rocket is an image celebrating the 60th anniversary this year of Sputnik, the first artificial Earth satellite which launched aboard a modified R-7 rocket back on October 4th, 1957 from the very same launch pad they're launching from today.
ISS, this is 16-3. Launch lead, inaudible. Thank you, Slava.
So the Soyuz rocket itself stands 162 feet tall and tips the scales at 680,000 pounds and consists of the Soyuz MS-06 spacecraft inside of a protective shroud there at the top and then the three-stage Soyuz FG booster below. Spacecraft was mated to its booster and the three main stages were joined together back on Saturday. Then the entire rocket began its trek over to the launch pad at 7 a.m. Baikonur time on Sunday, arriving less than 2 hours later where it was raised to its vertical position for final pre-launch preparations. The Soyuz spacecraft with its three crew members on board sits high above those three stages of the booster, which uses kerosene and liquid oxygen as the propellant. The first stage has 4 liquid engines strapped onto the side of the core vehicle, and each one of those burns for about 1 minute 58 seconds before they drop away. And here we're going to watch a quick animation of what the Soyuz launch looks like. Again, the final towers will drop away, the final umbilicals will drop away, and the engines will fire. They'll actually fire for several seconds before liftoff actually occurs as they ramp up in power, eventually being strong enough to overcome the weights holding the rocket in place. Once there's no bolts or anything, once the thrust is high enough, it leaps free of those weights and begins rocking them across the sky. Again, that first stage consisting of those 4 strap-on boosters, each of those firing for 1 minute 58 seconds until they eventually finish their job and then they drop away. First, the launch escape tower will be jettisoned once they reach the specified altitude, followed by those 4 boosters, which if we have a clear enough night, we'll be able to see, and it's pretty spectacular. And then that core stage continues to burn. The launch shroud retracts and drops away. The second stage then continues to burn until 4 minutes 47 seconds into the flight. At that point, they do something called a hot staging technique where the third stage actually begins firing before the second stage cuts off and drops away. And then the third stage finishes the job. It continues burning until 8 minutes 45 seconds into the flight before it cuts off and drops away as well. At that point, the altitude will be about 126 statute miles, and the Soyuz will have traveled all the way over towards the eastern Russian border with China. And then the spacecraft itself will again deploy all those antennas and everything, and along with the solar arrays, and be ready to chase down the International Space Station. The spacecraft is scheduled to dock once again to the orbiting complex today after only 4 orbits, or about 6 hours after the launch. And then just 5 minutes and 8 seconds before the launch, the space station is actually going to fly directly over the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. And then by the time that they actually launch, the station will already be at an altitude of about 251 statute miles over southern Russia, just north of the northeast border with Mongolia. And the launch is precisely timed for the moment when the Earth's rotation will place the Baikonur Cosmodrome in the plane of the space station's orbit. Basically just lining everything up to ensure that they can do that very short orbit, 4-orbit rendezvous, catching up with the station in only about 6 hours. And then at the time of the Soyuz spacecraft's initial orbital insertion, or when they actually reach space and the rocket cuts off at about 8 minutes and 45 seconds after the launch, the station will already be over the Sea of Japan, just northwest of the Japanese islands, at an altitude of, again, about 251 statute miles, or meaning it'll be 2,719 miles ahead of the Soyuz spacecraft as that chase down begins. The planned 6-hour rendezvous will culminate with the docking to the Poisk module, and that's scheduled to take place at 9:57 p.m. Central Time tonight, 8:57 a.m. over in Baikonur on Wednesday morning, where Russian and American dignitaries, guests, family, and friends will be watching all of the events unfold. And atop the rocket inside the Soyuz MS-06, again, Mark Vande and Joe Acaba of NASA and Alexander Misurkin of Roscosmos. Right now, we're 25 minutes and 8 seconds away from launch. The entire Soyuz spacecraft is 23.5 feet long and weighs in at 15,650 pounds and is comprised of 3 separate modules. The descent module, which is situated right there in the middle of the Soyuz vehicle, contains those customized seats we talked about earlier for the crew members during the launch, entry, and landing phases, and also has all of the controls and displays necessary for the flight. It also contains life support systems, battery for the re-entry and landing, and parachutes and the soft landing rocket engines, which are used to slow the Soyuz just before touchdown when it lands in Kazakhstan. There's 8 hydrogen peroxide thrusters located on the module that are used to control the spacecraft's orientation, or its attitude, during the descent until those parachutes deploy. It also has a guidance, navigation, and control system to maneuver the vehicle during the descent phase of the mission. The descent module weighs 6,393 pounds and has a habitable volume of only 141 cubic feet, so it's definitely a bit of a tight fit. And about 110 pounds of payload can come back, and it's the only portion that survives re-entry. The orbital module, which is accessed through a hatch at the top of the descent module, is connected via that pressurized hatch. It's where the crew has a small amount of room to move around during the flight to the station, and has a slightly larger volume of 230 cubic feet. And at the very top has the docking mechanism, hatch, and rendezvous antennas located. And then the docking mechanism is used to dock with the space station, and the hatch allows entry into the orbiting laboratory. Those rendezvous antennas are used by the automated docking system, which uses radar to maneuver towards the station for docking. There's also a forward-looking window in the module that they can use to take manual measurements of the distance and closing speed with a laser rangefinder in the event of failure of that automated rendezvous antenna. Then the third and final module, the propulsion module, houses the oxygen storage tanks, the main engine, the attitude control thrusters, the avionics, and the communications and control equipment. The propulsion portion of this module handles all of the orbital maneuvers, including the ones that they need to rendezvous with the space station and the deorbit burn at the end of the spacecraft's mission. And then before they're deployed, 2 solar arrays are folded against the body of the vehicle, against the body of the propulsion module, which separates from the descent module after a deorbit burn, along with the orbital module. And those solar panels have a wingspan of almost 35 feet. And then the entire spacecraft serves not only as this crew transport vehicle to and from the station, but also as an emergency return vehicle in the event the crew should have to leave the station unexpectedly. Back now with another live view of the Soyuz rocket on the pad, though. We are 22 minutes, 5 seconds and counting before launch. Again, scheduled at 4:17 p.m. Central Time, 3:17 a.m. over in Baikonur.
Ты понесешь с собой, любимый, ты понесешь с собой повсюду, ты понесешь с собой повсюду, родной землю, милый дом.
Launch lead, this is Altair, go ahead.
So once again, today's Soyuz MS-06 launch is going to begin astronaut Mark Vandehey's first time flying into space. Why don't we take a moment now to learn a little bit more about Mark and his path to becoming an astronaut.
So I always, as a kid, I never would have told anybody that I wanted to be an astronaut. My attitude about that was like saying, I want to be Spider-Man or I want to be a superhero. I always thought that working in NASA would be amazing because my physics background, the photography you see from space, and the knowledge that we're kind of pushing the limits with our space program. All those things made NASA seem very appealing to me. The fact that I got to be an astronaut is gravy. And now my attitude about actually being an astronaut, actually getting to go to space, that's all just, I keep getting these bonus deals that are even better and better. So I'm pretty excited about it. The thing about physics that I really like is it takes what we know, figures out a mathematical model for it, and then you can use that to try to get to what we don't know and theorize about things. It helps us imagine things that we can't even sometimes use instruments yet to detect, and then science follows up with that to try to do experiments and try to test theories we come up with. So certainly being able to contribute to science, the space station's all about science, and it's helping NASA further our exploration goals. I really think we have to keep exploring. Most of our nation's background involves people leaving what they were comfortable with and coming to a place that was new and different and very risky. So I think it's part of our national character to want to explore. Dedicating those resources to this peaceful endeavor that can actually help out all of humanity. My name is Mark Vandehey, and I'm a NASA astronaut.
That again, a quick look at Mark Vandehey making his first trip into space today aboard the Soyuz 06 vehicle. As you can see from our countdown clock, we are just coming up now on 19 minutes away from launch.
Любимыми не расставайтесь. С любимыми не расставайтесь. Всей кровью прорастайте в них. И каждый раз навек прощайте. И каждый раз навек прощайтесь. И каждый раз навек прощайтесь. Когда уходите на небо.
And again, you'll occasionally hear some of that music being piped. That's actually the music being piped in to the crew inside of the Soyuz spacecraft as they are strapped in about 2 hours before the launch and have to sit in there for quite a while before all the action starts. But we are a little under 18 minutes away from launch. Mark Vande, Joe Acaba, and Alexander Misurkin strapped in, and all preparations with the rocket going without any issues being tracked so far. The rocket fully fueled and everything looking good so far for an on-time liftoff at 4:17 p.m. Central. And as the clocks continue to count down to the launch of the Soyuz MS-06 crew, why don't we take a moment now to learn a little bit more about Joe Acaba on his road to becoming an astronaut.
I think a lot of times people will look and think that there has to be something, you know, pivotal or magical that happens in your life that is going to lead you in a certain direction. So I would tell people, you know, it's not always one thing that's going to happen that's going to change your life, but it's all the decisions you make along the way. You know, as I reflect back, I see all of these small pieces that kind of fell into place, starting with my parents and the value they put on education. So that was always, you know, kind of priority number one. I had a great experience at University of California in Santa Barbara and ended up continuing that and getting my master's degree in geology. Before I came to NASA, I was teaching middle school math and science out in Florida. And then I look back at the educators that I've had in my life, and being a former educator, I now see it from kind of a different angle. And I had one teacher, my metal shop teacher that I talk about often, that when I look at what he did, having anywhere from 14-year-olds to 18-year-olds in a metal shop, working with the lathe, working with the welders, you know, melting stuff, and, you know, kind of the responsibility that he gave to us. Then I look at my Peace Corps experience and working with different cultures, which is, of course, what we're doing today with the International Space Station, a little bit of military experience. So I look at all these small things that I've done in my life that during the time, neither one of them was really pivotal, but I think they've led me to where I am today. I'm Joe Acaba, and I'm an astronaut.
And that was just a quick look at Joe Acaba, who's going to spend about 5 months as a flight engineer with the Expedition 53 and 54 crew before he returns to Earth with the two crew members inside the Soyuz with Mark Vande and Alexander Misurkin, 15 minutes away and counting from launch. As you just heard, though, Joe Acaba, a former educator who taught both middle school and high school, will be using his time on board the station to help bring a little bit more of the International Space Station into the classroom as we look forward to a year of education on station. We'll have 2 educators flying over the next 12 months, with both Joe Acaba right now and then Ricky Arnold scheduled for a flight early next year. Again, just using their roles as former educators to help bring NASA a little bit more into the classroom and help inspire and inform the next generation of engineers, scientists, and other STEM education students coming up to be future NASA employees, potential astronauts, or go off into other fields that help drive our economy and drive technology forward. So a big boost for our educations here as we get ready to see Joe Acaba launch into space. Again, we are 14 minutes and counting away. And right now, a group of NASA representatives are there on site in Baikonur, just a short distance away from the launch pad. For a quick update on activities there, why don't we go now to NASA Public Affairs Officer Rob Navius.
Dan, it has been less than 7 weeks since we were here last in the Central Asian desert, and as summer turns to fall, we're back, ready for another launch to again bring the space station to a 6-man crew, just 10 days after 3 other crew members left the orbital outpost. This will be the first time since June of 2010 that 2 NASA astronauts will have launched from Baikonur to the station, a launch that will kick off a year of an increased NASA astronaut complement on the International Laboratory. As always, NASA's Associate Administrator for Exploration is here, Bill Gerstenmaier, joining ISS Program Manager Kirk Shireman, along with a number of officials from Boeing, which was instrumental in securing the Soyuz seat for Joe Acaba to boost NASA's representation on the station. All of the preparations for launch have gone by the book. The weather is good. Soyuz booster is fueled and ready for launch. A launch that comes just 3 weeks before the 60th anniversary of the launch of Sputnik 1, the world's first artificial satellite from this same launch pad, a launch that opened the door to human space exploration. That's it for now from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. Now back to you, Mission Control in Houston.
And as always, a big thanks to Rob out there with the NASA teams ready to watch this launch from the viewing stands just a short distance away from the launch pad. Again, you heard him make mention of the Sputnik anniversary. And again, if we get any the cabin views inside the Soyuz, we should hopefully be able to see the zero gravity indicator that this crew is using, which is a small Sputnik model. It's going to be hanging just above Acaba, Vande, and Misurkin. And the crews routinely use these small indicators, typically small models, toys, or dolls, to basically just tell them when they're in zero gravity. They start to float after that third stage shutdown when the Soyuz is in its preliminary orbit, a little over 120 statute miles over the Earth. This one in particular was made for the crew by RSC Energia, who's the Russian aerospace contractor that provides the Soyuz for Roscosmos. And this one in particular, very symbolic, as it was developed by Energia and made from actual parts of the Buran shuttle, Russia's former space shuttle program. So hopefully getting some cabin views throughout this flight, but if not, that's what they have in there for them. 10 minutes, 22 seconds and counting away from our planned launch today at 4:17 p.m. Central Time.
Still left off, please. Close your helmet. Copy. Baikonur lead. 5 minutes till launch. This is Baikonur lead.
And there, an in-cabin view. Right here, we're looking at Joe Acaba, who's at pretty much right in the middle of your screen. He's the right seater today. You can see just above his head that Sputnik model that's going to be serving as the zero-G indicator. Just to his left is Alexander Misurkin, the Soyuz commander for this flight. And then in the left seat, just off screen, is Mark Vande. So 2 NASA astronauts, 1 Russian cosmonaut on this flight today. And we are 9 minutes and counting away from launch. And once we get to about the T-minus 7 minute mark, things will definitely pick up quite a bit, as by that point all the pre-launch operations are completed. Again, this is a 3-stage rocket carrying the crew into space today. That first stage consisting of 4 strap-on boosters in the core stage. Then the core stage continues on as the second stage. And the third and final stage is going to continue to fire until about 8 minutes and 45 seconds post-liftoff. And when that shuts down and detaches, the Soyuz will be in its preliminary orbit.
Altair, this is Baikonur lead, and through the cameras we can see the commander and FE1. Copy all, thank you.
And here review again, Misurkin at the bottom. Mark Vande getting our first look at him on the top of your camera. And again, that Sputnik model floating just over Misurkin. That's going to be the 0G indicator for today. 6 minutes, 45 seconds away from the planned launch.
One and FE2's tablets are 89% charged. Altair, this is Baikonur lead. 1 minute readiness has been announced. Everything goes as planned, and I will be announcing everything during the launch. Baikonur launch lead. This is Altair 1. Everything is great on board, and we are ready for launch.
And so again, getting good reports, everything looking ready for launch. At this point, the first and second stage engines ready for launch. Telemetry has been received from the rocket, indicating that all of the primary and backup systems are indeed ready. Under 5.5 minutes away. The exact launch time is targeted at 4:17 and 2 seconds p.m. Central Time. And again, you'll see the umbilicals detach, the ground support equipment detach from the rocket itself and lower. When the second umbilical detaches, that means you're about 15 seconds away from liftoff. And the engines will actually fire for several seconds before the vehicle actually takes flight, as they continue to just ramp up to that flight speed until they can basically overwhelm the force held in place by those launch locks, and then it'll just press them out of the way, and then the rocket will spring forward and then be on its way across the Kazakh sky.
Ground measurement system is activated by run 1 command. Combustion chamber nitrogen purge.
And we are 4 minutes and counting. Around this time, they'll start to purge the fuel lines and other elements of the rocket with nitrogen. That helps to just fireproof them by removing any vapors of the fuel or the oxidizer that may be left over. And you can see all the helmets closed on the crew members. That puts them on the suit oxygen. And all the cockpit displays controls have been activated, and the onboard system switching over to onboard control.
Onboard measurement system is activated by run 2 command. Oxidizer and fuel drain and safety valves of launch vehicle are closed. Booster propellant tank pressurization was initiated.
So at this point, the booster tank being pressurized for flight. That just starting. This helps to just optimize the flow of all that fuel and helps to actually add some structural support to the rocket itself. 2 minutes and counting. And we're about a minute and 15 seconds away. We should hear the ground propellant feed get terminated any time now, and the Soyuz will be ready to switch over to internal power.
Vehicle to internal power.
And the vehicle now on internal power. And you can see the first umbilical there separating from the booster. That'll mean when we have auto sequence start. I'm getting confirmation the ground propellant feed has been terminated. We'll have one more umbilical to separate. And there you can see the engines now firing. The launch command issued. These engines now ramping up.
Engine turbopumps at flight speed. Engines at max.
And liftoff. Mark Vande, Alexander Misurkin, and Joe Acaba lifting off and now on their way to the International Space Station.
10 seconds.
Over 10 seconds already into the flight, getting good first stage performance. Soyuz delivering about 930,000 pounds of thrust from those 4 boosters and the core engine.
We're feeling great too. $40 seconds and the vehicle is stable.
Continuing to get good calls. The vehicle stable. Everything looking great as it sears across the Kazakh sky there, burning an image across the black.
Pressure is nominal.
This first stage going to burn liquid fuel for the first 2 minutes and 6 seconds into the flight.
60 seconds. Yaw, pitch, roll are nominal.
So the yaw, the pitch, the roll, everything determining the attitude of the rocket, basically which way it's pointing, all looking good. Continuing to get good first stage performance from the Soyuz rocket.
$80 seconds. Booster motion control system parameter.
And at this point, the vehicle already moving in excess of 1,100 miles per hour. We're a little over a minute and a half into the flight since liftoff. Still getting good calls on vehicle performance, everything looking great. The next major milestone coming up is going to be that escape tower actually being jettisoned. And just got confirmation the escape tower has been jettisoned. And getting a great view there, you just saw the 4 strap-on boosters have been jettisoned, their job complete. Soyuz already at an altitude of about 28 statute miles, traveling at over 3,350 miles per hour.
130 seconds, the vehicle is stable.
So we're over 2 minutes now since the launch. Everything looking great. The first stage has done its job. Those 4 strap-on boosters have dropped away. That single core engine now continuing to fire. Getting confirmation from the visiting vehicle officer here that the launch shroud has been jettisoned. So the Soyuz spacecraft now exposed. The rocket's altitude about 48 miles high. And at this point in the flight, as we just passed 3 minutes, the Soyuz already traveling at speeds in excess of 4,700 miles per hour. And again, the core stage is the second stage, continuing to perform as expected.
90 seconds.
It's 56 feet in length, 13.5 in diameter, and has a single engine with 4 fuel chambers that provide between 178,000 and 222,000 pounds of thrust, depending on the altitude, for its 3 minutes and 28 seconds of operation. This stage is going to continue to burn until about the 4-minute 43-second mark. Then the Soyuz will be ready to do what's called a hot stage technique, and that's when the third stage will ignite while the second is still burning. That's why, if you remember views of that rocket, there's that lattice structure, that open area between the second and third stages. And we've just crossed 4 minutes since launch.
— 250 seconds. Your pitch roll are nominal. Everything is nominal on board. The crew is feeling fine.
As you heard, the crew doing fine, getting an unprecedentedly long view of the Soyuz. A very clear night there in Baikonur. And here a view inside. There you can see Acaba. A smile of the crew doing well as the rocket continues to send them into orbit. The second stage still going. And confirmation the second stage has separated successfully.
We also saw the separation of stage 2, and everything is nominal on board. 310 seconds.
And so at this point, the second stage has dropped away. The core booster separates at an altitude of about 105 miles. The Soyuz spacecraft now being propelled by the single engine of the Soyuz's third stage. That's going to provide 67,000 pounds of thrust and burn for about 4 minutes and 2 seconds. So the first two stages complete. The third and final stage of the climb to orbit now underway. Everything continuing to go very smoothly with this flight. Crew on board doing well, and the Soyuz continuing its climb to orbit.
— 380 seconds of flight. Third stage thrusters operate nominally. Everything is nominal on board, and the crew is feeling fine.
So we're well over 6 minutes now. The crew, the rocket, all doing well.
— 420 seconds. Your pitch roll are nominal. Everything is nominal on board. The crew is feeling fine.
So over 7 minutes now, approaching the 7.5 minute mark soon. And the velocity of the rocket already about 13,500 miles an hour. Getting calls down from Misurkin. The crew doing well. You can see Vande at the top of your screen, Misurkin there in the commander's seat. And then just above him is that Sputnik model, which keep your eye on it after the third stage cuts off and separates. We should see that start to float. And once the third stage is done and delivers the Soyuz to orbit, the spacecraft will again execute all of those pre-programmed commands to get out a number of antennas and deploy the solar arrays. And again, the third stage should fire until about the 8-minute and 45-second mark post-launch. So we should be approaching that very soon.
510 seconds, 520.
And there, the telltale jolt, that tells us that the third stage has cut off, getting confirmation it has separated, and confirmation of Soyuz spacecraft separation, the Soyuz now in orbit.
This is Baikonur lead. Congratulations on the successful insertion, and I would like to give the floor to Mission Control Moscow. Yes, we confirmed the separation. Everything was nominal. Thank you very much, and we're working with Moscow Mission Control. Now, this is Mission Control Moscow. How to copy? These are Altairs. We copy you loud and clear. That's great. We are standing by for your KO report, and we are standing by for further operations. Copy all.
And again, a successful orbital insertion. The Soyuz now in orbit and got confirmation all of the antennas and the solar arrays have deployed successfully. So textbook launch for this rocket today, delivering the crew into its initial orbit of about 126 statute miles. The third stage cut off as we saw the crew get a bit of a jolt there and dropped away. It performs an avoidance maneuver by opening a valve on its liquid oxygen tank and then falls back through the Earth's atmosphere. But the Soyuz now in its preliminary orbit, and that orbit is going to get raised over the next 6 hours. Control has now been passed over to the Russian Mission Control Center in Koryov. We're going to oversee these three crew members as they chase down the International Space Station.
Control enabled.
Again, they're going to execute a series of burns over the next several hours to gradually raise their orbit, starting out at 126 statute miles, eventually going all the way up to 250 to bring them in line with the International Space Station for that docking.
Gone through, and we are ready to report the first reading of the lift check. Moscow, this Altair 2. 2635 is the time. SAP pressure is inaudible. BO 817. 858 is another reading. 18.5, 19, 19, 26.5, 20, 2.2, 21st, inaudible, 22, 333, 23, 329, 22, 24, 19.9, 25, 16.7, 26, 264. Propellant 879. These are the parameters of the form 03. Copy, Altair. Thank you. Moscow, Altair 1. The free drift indicator is not illuminated, and we are maneuvering. We have a roll maneuver ongoing. Copy. Have you activated TV? We are checking. We are receiving the image, Altair, on the ground. Moscow.
And this is Mission Control Houston. Again, the 3 crew members, Alexander Misurkin, Mark Vande, and Joe Acaba, successful launch. They're in their preliminary orbit, and all of the solar arrays and all the antennas deployed successfully immediately upon reaching that orbit. Control of the vehicle now overseen by the Russian Mission Control Center in Koryov. They're going through a series of checkouts right now before they begin, again, chasing down the International Space Station. They'll have a series of burns over the next several hours, which will gradually raise their orbit as they chase down the International Space Station, ultimately culminating in a docking tonight at about 9:57 p.m. Central Time, 10:57 p.m. Eastern. Here's just a quick rundown of all of our upcoming events. We're going to have launch replays coming up. We'll stick around for a little bit and give you a good idea of when those are coming up, but we'll have those immediately following this broadcast. And then we'll have our launch video file. Our coverage for docking is going to resume at 9:15 p.m. Central Time, with again that docking planned at 9:57 p.m. After a successful docking, we'll break away for a little bit while they do a series of leak checks and other items before coming back on for the hatch opening at 11 p.m. Central. The hatch opening is scheduled to take place at about 11:40 p.m. And then following that, the crews will make their way inside, say hello to the other Expedition 53 crew members, and then have a chance to speak to friends and family and also program officials from NASA and Roscosmos. We're going to watch all these events unfold back in Baikonur, and then we'll have our final video file following that.
Activate COM assets as soon as the thruster stops firing. Copy, Georgi. The second compass will be 1 minute after the second burn. So we will be ready, we'll be standing by for the COM assets activation. Copy that. Now, please be ready for the manual control test during the next compass at page 45. The Acaba inhibit will be 3.5 minutes after the compass starts. So you will have enough time to do step number 1. So the time of the Acaba inhibit is 01:52:30. I confirm 01:52:30. Moscow. This is Altair 2. Go ahead. Second reading. The SAP pressure inaudible. 816 is in BO. The next reading is delta -1. Copy, Altair 2. Have you checked the indicators on KSP, Altair? We are checking. Moscow at 003224. We have received the message. Local vertical is no issues. The message Acaba inhibit is still illuminated. Copy. You know, Acaba have already been activated. It's just the message, and I think it will soon be off. Yes, we have Acaba 2 message now that Acaba 2 is activated. Moscow, this is Altair 2. Go ahead, Altair 2. The KSP left and right are all nominal. The indicators on KSPs are all nominal. Copy. Could you please mark the time?
And this is Mission Control Houston again, just to recap.
010000 at the end. 0119.
Just to recap, a very successful launch today. Joe Acaba, Alexander Misurkin, and Mark Vande in orbit in their Soyuz spacecraft. Right now they're running through all of their initial checkouts of the vehicle, all the antennas, and the solar arrays deployed successfully following a successful roughly 9-minute flight into orbit. The launch came right on time. as expected, and then all the stages performed as expected, not tracking didn't track any issues with the first, second, or third stage during that climb to orbit, and delivered them into that initial 126-mile altitude to begin their chase down of the International Space Station. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up our launch coverage. Stick around, as very shortly we'll have those launch replays, and then in just a couple of hours we'll be back with our docking coverage. Again, that's going to be at 9:15 p.m. Central Time, 10:15 p.m. Eastern, when these three crew members dock to the International Space Station. So rocket launch views coming at you real shortly, and we'll be back in a few hours for the docking. Until then, thanks for joining us, and this is Mission Control Houston.
The vehicle is on orbit